Hello and welcome everyone to the Asia Society Policy Institute's webinar on Deciphering Pakistan's Future, a Post-Election Analysis. I'm Farwa Aamer, the Director of South Asia Initiatives here at the Institute in New York. Pakistan, the world's fifth largest democracy with a population nearing 240 million, recently underwent a pivotal electoral process on February 8th. This election marks a significant juncture in the nation's trajectory, characterized by its complexity and far-reaching implications. The journey to the polls has been nothing short of tumultuous, punctuated by a series of dramatic events that captivated the nation and the international community alike. We have witnessed the ebb and flow of political fortunes, from the legal scrutiny faced by former Premier Imran Khan to the resurgence of the Nawaz Sharif as a formidable contender for the top post. Such volatility is not unfamiliar to Pakistan, a nation accustomed to the unpredictable nature of its political landscape. The fairness of the elections and the influence of the country's powerful military have been subjects of intense scrutiny and debate in the lead up to the polling day. Now, with the results before us, which notably favor Imran Khan's party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf or the PTI, a new chapter in Pakistan's political saga begins. Yet, the curtain has not fallen on uncertainty. Key questions loom large. How will the next government take shape? And what roles will other prominent political parties, especially the center-left Pakistan's People's Party, assume? Will these elections recalibrate the delicate equilibrium between the civilian governance and the military influence? What lies ahead for the nation's economy and its global standing? And perhaps, most crucially, will this government endure the full term? To unpack all this and more, I have with us two of our incredible panelists. We have with us Mr. Zahid Hussain, who is an award-winning journalist, author, and former correspondent for the Times of London and the Wall Street Journal, and Ms. Arifa Noor, who's a renowned journalist and host of NewsWise show on the Dawn News TV channel. Thank you both for joining me today. I can't wait to dive into a discussion, but a few housekeeping notes for our session today. We'll have some opening questions for our panelists. I'll use my chair privilege to do that, but we'll open the floor for audience Q&A as well. So please use the Zoom Q&A box in front of you and send in your questions, and we'll try and take some of those later in our discussion today. So without further ado, if I can just pose a question to both of you. As we go into this post-election analysis, could each of you offer a deep dive into the whole electoral exercise and the political dynamics preceding the elections, perhaps highlighting key factors and driving forces that you think significantly influence the election outcomes? Arifa, if I may start with you.
Thank you, Farwa. Thank you for the opportunity and the question. As you know, the elections took place last week, and it's been an interesting experience. Interesting because Pakistan has a sketchy history when it comes to elections. We can talk about the fact that, or as some people like to argue, that we've always had perhaps elections which have been followed by allegations of rigging, pre-poll, post-poll rigging, and this time was no different. But at the same time, I think that there was a level of a crackdown which did seem unusual and unprecedented, and I think we can call it unusual and unprecedented, particularly because of the way it was carried out on politicians, the way Pakistani politics is structured and how it works out. Generally, the politicians and the military do, have a relationship, and that relationship in which the politicians are junior partners. But I think to a large extent, the crackdown that took place on Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, particularly after the May 9th incident, the pressures have been immense. I mean, the entire political party was more or less underground. Many of its top tier was arrested, and if not arrested, they were forced to leave the political party in, using various ways. The ones that stayed with the political party faced constant harassment and raids. In fact, till the election took place, a number of them contested their seats being underground. There was no political campaign from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf that you saw on the ground. If you went to a particular constituency, you saw, you saw one contestant, you saw his posters, his banners, but on the other side, there was just silence. There was a political party. There were very few posters that you saw up. And this, I'm talking particularly here of Punjab. Obviously, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, which is a stronghold of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, was a little different, but still, the leadership did face a lot of problems. And I don't think that for once the military establishment was in any mood to sort of hide their objectives or the manner in which this crackdown was happening. But obviously, this was in the run-up to the election. And the unkindest cut of all, I would say, is the fact that the Supreme Court came up with a judgment which took away the symbol, the election symbol from the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. The argument is that in a country with such a low literacy rate, when voters go in, it's very essential for them to know that which symbol they have to, vote for rather than the name of the political party or the name of the candidate. And that was removed. And the entire political party took place in every candidate, in fact, in other words, every candidate of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf took part in the elections as an independent candidate. We have a constituency-based system, first past the post. The country is divided into constituencies. In every constituency, there are candidates, and the voter is supposed to vote for the candidate, and whoever gets the most votes wins. So it's not proportional representation or, or a reserved list concept. Election day in itself, I think, was a lot better, even though the cell phone service had been switched off, and that was seen as an effort to again influence the election day behavior and polling. But still, I think by and large, there were exceptions, of course, but people were not stopped from voting. There were very few incidents where polling stations, did not open up. People made their way to the polling stations. They voted. They weren't really harassed. And that went rather smoothly. The problem or the allegations that are now being the allegations that are being made by the PTI are about the post-polling event, which is when the votes are counted. And that is now the thing that the PTI and other political parties are talking about, that, the votes that were polled, and they claim that they have the documentation to prove it, did not show up in the final results. They were changed at the last moment to allow some or many of the senior leadership of the PMLN to win. Yet, I would say that this is one of the biggest upsets in the electoral history of Pakistan, where we clearly had one party which was not just the underdog, but the military establishment was saying time and again it was like, a red line had been drawn through the name of the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. We knew who the favored party was. We knew who the favored prime ministerial candidate was. And yet, after all this effort, what we call pre-poll rigging in Pakistan, which is all that happens in the run-up to the election, Pakistan's Tehreek-e-Insaf still managed to emerge as the single largest party, even though all the candidates are still being called independent candidates. Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz has come second, and there are still, this issue will go to court because a number of candidates are now challenging the election results. So let's see how this plays out. Obviously, what led to it, I think there's really not much debate on this, if I can say that, in Pakistan. Obviously, in Pakistan, one of the youngest countries in the world in terms of demography, we have, a voter base which is literally 50%, which falls under the age of 40 to 35 to 18. And they have grown up in the post-Musharraf period of Pakistan. They have grown up at a time or come to awareness in a time where you've had television, 24/7 news channels. They've grown up at a time when cell phones and the internet is something you take for granted, smartphones. They have seen the older political parties as, for them, the older political parties are part of the status quo. the dynastic politics. They do not remember the military coups in Pakistan. They do not remember the fact that, the Pakistan People's Party, which is obviously also a very significant political player in Pakistan, had one prime minister who was hanged, another, his daughter was assassinated in a terrorist attack. They do not remember that Nawaz Sharif was also removed in a military coup. All most of them tend to remember is the fact that since they have come of age, these two political families have been in power. And I think there is a bit of a candidate fatigue or family fatigue or dynasty fatigue. You can use whichever phrase you want. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is seen as an Imran Khan with his fabulous career as a cricketer and then a philanthropist is seen as an outsider. The fact that he was thrown out of power, within 3 years of taking over as prime minister adds to this mystique. And he is now seen as the anti-status quo figure. This is my view. And obviously, I think the biggest factor has been inflation. The economy has been, in a nosedive since 2017, if one can say. The inflation figures for some time, for some years, go into double digits. People, ordinary people are suffering. Their lifestyles have suffered. Their quality of life has suffered. That is going to have an impact on election day. And I think that was a major factor. Then, of course, there is, for various reasons, also some sort of an awareness or discussion around the role of the military establishment, that political governments keep getting disturbed, they keep getting, destabilized, and the military establishment has a role to play there. And I think a lot of the vote that we saw on the big upset, as we call it, that happened on February 8th was also a vote against this interference. So you can talk about that. And last, as I said, the young generation, it's a generation that has been brought up on the smartphone or is comfortable with the smartphone, or even if they are, older, are getting used to the idea of the smartphone. Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf reaches out to them through digital technology. It doesn't depend on the mainstream media anymore. So the rule book in Pakistan is that a party falls out of favor. It's demonized to some extent. Maybe that's a harsh word, but it's criticized very heavily on the mainstream media. Its coverage is controlled. It becomes limited. They did the same thing with Imran Khan. He's been in jail for months now. You can't show his picture on television. You cannot report a number of his activities, but social media just, makes all that irrelevant. His party has carried out the most effective social media campaign, making the voters aware of what their constituency was, who the candidate was, what his sign was, what the polling station was. And they did it all through social media, and that's where they carried out their campaign. And their slogan was also very interesting. Their slogan was basically, if I can say it in Urdu, and then I'll end here, Zulm ka badla vote se. After May 9th, particularly in Punjab, the harassment that was carried out of ordinary people, privileged citizens, ordinary citizens from the low working class or the middle class, because the police went on a rampage, arresting people, raiding people's houses, creating an environment of fear. And that there was a reaction to it. People went quiet, but there was a reaction to it. And that reaction we saw on February 8th. And Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf really capitalized on that. Their slogan for the election was Zulm ka badla vote se. So, whether you want to call it injustice, zulm, or whether you want to call it oppression, take revenge for the oppression / the injustice by voting. And I think that's basically what, at least for me, that's what I saw on election day.
Thank you so much, Arifa. I really like what you said about the candidate fatigue. The young generation that you highlighted, it had a sense of detachment to sort of this dynasty politics, and PTI, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, leveraged the power of social media to reach out to the young voter base. And like you said, again, to highlight that, February 8 proved to be a vote against the kind of intervention that Pakistan has seen for the past many decades in its electoral process. But moving forward, I want to come to Mr. Hussain now and get his insights and perspectives on the same. How did you assess this whole electoral exercise that Pakistan underwent last week?
Thank you, Farwa. I think the elections in Pakistan has never been non-controversial. There have always been some problem. There have always been allegations. But this time, the way the elections were held, it was much more obvious that the decision, or it was perceived by a large number of people, that the decision has already been decided. The election has already been decided, and it was, and largely because the PTI, which I think is the largest political party in the country, everything was done to keep it out of the electoral race. We all know that most of its leaders are in jail. The party was not allowed to campaign, and the worst thing happened to it, that electoral symbol, which is very important in Pakistani election, was taken away. So in a way, PTI started at a very disadvantageous position. A lot of their candidates, original candidates, were taken away, and they put new candidates, I think probably a week before the election. So to the run up to the election has clearly given indication that it's not going to be free and fair election. It was very obvious, and it was very obvious that the other party was being backed by the military establishment. That was very obvious from the beginning, and I think probably nevertheless it was the most consequential election we have in decades. It was largely because what we saw that there was some. And I think probably they underestimated the strength of the voters, the administration, and they did not expect that the people would come out in such a large number to vote for the PTI, which has already been actually they tried everything to sideline it. What happened on the election day is quite remarkable in Pakistan history. That people came out in large number, and mostly the youth and women, that they played a significant role in the voting, and against the expectation of the administration and against the expectation of the military establishment, PTI emerged as the single largest party, despite all those restrictions. But in fact, actually, the result would have been quite different had the elections were not the votes were not manipulated at the end. And in many cases, I was also witness, and I was at a television channel commenting of what was happening until 4 o'clock. It was very clear that the PTI was far ahead than the other political parties, particularly in Punjab against the Pakistan Muslim League led by Nawaz group. In fact, there was some indication that Nawaz Sharif could lose his seat from Lahore, which is supposed to be the strongest hope. And the biggest setback for the PMLN has been in Punjab, because it was seen as a citadel of PMLN power, and there is a perception, and I think probably that's not wrong, that the results were manipulated in the morning, because some of the candidates who were winning were in the morning, they lost it. They were winning about 40,000 votes, some of the PTI candidates, and but the result showed completely different. I think in a way, the Pakistan is now, after election, is much more fragmented, much more polarized. It has been polarized for a very long time, But I think that the way the elections were held and the perception that it was stolen, the election was stolen from the PTI, has actually increased the polarization. And I think, and particularly the fragmented, when I'm talking about fragmented, it's also varies from province to province. Like Punjab, yes, it was a major battleground, the largest province. And in fact, actually, whoever wins in Punjab is expected to form the government. But the result in KP, the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, northwestern province of Pakistan, it was actually astonishing. It was a clear verdict for PTI, despite all those restrictions and repression. People, and I think probably one of the reasons that the administration could not do much to change the result. Basically, there was also fear that the people reaction would be much more stronger. And out of 45 seats in the National Assembly from the KP, 42 PTI candidates won those seats. So overwhelming majority is still, despite all those problems, despite all the repression, they managed to win almost all of the seats except for 3. And the provincial legislation, because we have general election and provincial legislative assembly on the same day. So in KP, PTI has got about 2/3 majority. The problem is that under the court order, PTI is not recognized as a parliamentary party. It has put it in a huge disadvantage. As you know, that there are 70 reserved seats for women and religious minority. And it is distributed according to the number of seats they have won in the National Assembly. So since the PTI has not been recognized as a parliamentary party, it's just their members are called independent, so they will not get those seats. So in a way, actually, they will be deprived of almost 30 to 40 seats, which they could have gotten because of their number of their members, but they will not get it. Now, the situation, post-election situation, PMLN, which is the second largest party, has emerged as second largest party, and the People's Party. There are 2 other mainstream political parties. If you combine numbers, it gives, or some other allies, small party, it gives them a majority. And they will be able to form the government. But the major question is whether this kind of government, which has a little legitimacy and questionable legitimacy, would be able to provide a stable government. The thing is that the People's Party and PMLN has also been rivals. And this is basically, I think, is the return of what we had witnessed, coalition government, or called PDM government, for the 16 months after Imran Khan's ouster. Is exactly the same arrangement is being built. And I think probably it's very clear that this kind of plan for a coalition government is being backed by the military establishment. When you say actually what will be the relation between the civil and military relations after the election, it's very obvious, and we all know that how strong and how dominant military has been in the Pakistani politics. We all know that half of its existence there has been direct military rule. But in the other, and when there was, when we had civilian government, it was also the shadow of the military loomed large. In fact, actually, what we have seen over the last 5 years, under Imran Khan, there was a hybrid rule, which means that was a hybrid between civil government and the military. And obviously, military was a partner in the thing. But given the situation now, it seems that the political parties are in a much weaker position And so they will look towards the military always for the support that, and it's very clear that without military support, they will not be able to survive for a very long time. But what kind of arrangement will it be? It will be a coalition government, a weak coalition government of diverse political parties, but obviously with the backing of the military. But which means that the role of the military will be enhanced in the coming years. And we have already seen over the last 15 months, and after the caretaker government was installed, that army role has already started increasing. We all know that they always had they have been the major determinant of Pakistan's foreign policy and national security policy. But now actually they have also got into the economic planning, and which never happened before. So what will happen then? Which means that there will be a weak civilian government. And since Pakistan is facing such a huge, massive challenge, I think probably I have not seen in many decades that such an economic, worsening economic situation. This is not just the political crisis, but also economic crisis. And other, like for example, Pakistan is also facing huge challenge on the internal and external fronts too. And we have seen the revival of militant insurgency in two provinces, particularly in northwestern province of KP and also in Balochistan. So in this way, that election and the way the elections have been held, and the largest political party is being deprived the right to form the government, or trying to be kept out of it, I think it has created more division. But my worry is that because PTI has won the majority of seats, so how they are going to prevent the party from making the government at the province. So and they cannot. So if there's a PTI government in KP, and there will be I think there's it seems that it will be in constant confrontation with the central government. So I think what we are seeing, or what we are, I think that's very obvious in the scene, that it's not going to be very stable government. And my hunch is that we may see yet another election in next before 1 year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that brilliant overview, Mr. Hussain, and some things that you drew attention to, that how the elections have actually resulted in Pakistan becoming more polarized and more fragmented, and also because you've highlighted the fact that there is a concern about the legitimacy and the instability that might follow. I want to come to Arifa now and get her take on that, because in one of your pre-election analysis, you had shared that there were indications already of concerns about the potential for an unstable regime with a speculated short duration. Now that we have the election outcomes in front of us, and as Mr. Hussain was also pointing out, the number of factors that are in the play and all that's going along with whether this government is going to form in terms of a coalition and how will PTI step in, how do you assess the factors contributing to your early predictions, and what indicators will you be particularly watching to gauge the stability and longevity of this new government? So over to you, Arifa.
Thank you. So I'll begin by saying that, this is a question that Mr. Hussain and I keep discussing. Of course, we do nothing but discuss politics in Pakistan. I think in the run-up to the elections, we must have had countless conversations on it. But I would like you and all your listeners to know that this is the first time he's put a deadline on it, and such assertively, put it so assertively, as to say that I don't think it's that the next election might just be within a year. So I'd be too scared to put a deadline on it, especially after he's pronounced one. But yes, I mean, I think earlier too we were all worried about how stable a government would emerge from this election for two reasons. One, as we've already discussed, the kind of crackdowns and harassment that took place in the run-up to the election. And the popularity of PTI was such that we thought that by the time the election is held and PMLN comes out with as the single largest party and the PTI is denied its due share, there will be a problem. But now, of course, the election results have surprised most of us. Nobody thought that with all that had happened, the PTI would still be the single largest party. The PMLN would perform so badly that there would have to be, the kind of rigging that took place on the night of the election itself to provide them this PMLN with a decent number. So that's point number one, that now there is very little credibility to the election, because usually the pre-poll rigging in Pakistan is such that it does take you close to the desired election result. But when you have to also then manage the election result on the night to this extent, it adds to your problems. The second is that so far, it's not also very clear as if these political parties, that is the PMLN and the PPP, will be able to come together all that easily to form a government. At the moment, we are looking for we always used to laugh about it, talk about that there was the PDM government that ruled after the vote of no confidence took place in April 2022 till the summer of last year. And we would always joke that the new government that came in would be PDM 2.0 or PDM Pro Max. So now it's, the PPP can also smell blood, because the PMLN has so few seats that the PPP might, extract a larger share. There is also a strong voice within the PPP saying, let's stay out of the government. But I think more important than that is the fact that now we have a government that's whose credibility will be challenged to an extent that we didn't expect before the elections, and it will be dealing with the mountain of economic problems. And I think this was the reason we also foresaw a very unstable government. We're looking at a government that immediately has to go into IMF negotiations for an FF. And the general perception is that the conditions will be extremely harsh, and conditions that will be so harsh for a government that has so little credibility and legitimacy that it's, fulfilling or sticking to that IMF path is going to be difficult. We're talking about privatization. We're talking about figuring out a way to reduce government expenses. So imagine you're a government, you already don't have the legitimacy. There's a huge political party, that is seen to be the natural winner of the election, and you can't even spend money to get the, win over some of your own lost support. And we are also looking at the fact that at some level, the government will have to decide, and the IMF might press it, that you cannot keep increasing the burden on the ordinary people through higher utility bills or higher taxes without spreading the burden of the tax property, tax the retail sector. So between the property tax and the retail sector, it basically means that the next government of PMLN will not just have to hurt its own support base, which is the small trader or the market, but also the constituency of the military, because it happens to be one of the biggest players in the real estate market. So it's a catch-22 situation. Do you keep angering the people by increasing the burden on them, or do you hit your own constituency, which is already, a little bit, let's say, not hostile, but alienated? And of course, then we have the security problem that Mr. Hussain has already spoken about. So one of my concerns is that you have a security problem. It might grow worse. And if it does grow worse, we have a military establishment that is involved in so many things. It's looking after the economy. It's looking after the governance. It's what's holding the government together. Will it be able to devote the right amount of energy to a security crisis? Are we, back where we were with Musharraf? Because when we had, the chief of army staff was also the president of the country and running a government in a way, then obviously he doesn't have enough time to give to the security crisis, which was emerging and building up in 2006 and 2007. So these are some of the concerns which sort of make me wonder. And of course, as I said, the numbers in the parliament, let's see where, how it goes, how the legal challenge that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is throwing up by saying that we are going to go to the courts with these elections and contest some of the results. Let's see how that goes also. So I think I would just add that because Mr. Hussain has already sort of spoken about some of the issues there.
Thank you so much, Arifa. And you've further emphasized the lack of credibility. So the number of alarm bells ringing right now. After the elections, we found ourselves somewhere between the number 45 and 47, and I think that is going to continue for a while. But particularly what you pointed out in terms of the economy and the economic stability, the challenge of the IMF, I think that's a very pertinent question that no country that is not economically stable, plus the security concerns that Pakistan's facing, will be able to find sort of a routing that it's looking for, especially for a new government. So with that in mind, Mr. Hussain, very briefly, because we're talking about economy right here, could I come to you and seek your insights on, or just like some sort of prescriptions you might have for this government, this new incoming government, or whatever shape that might take place, for the economy? How would this regime of sorts will work its way to, or how it should work its way to attract the foreign direct investment, work its forex reserves, sort of be that lucrative potential spot for investments and market otherwise to bloom. So what would be some of your suggestions for this new government from the economic point of view, and how it's going to deal with the IMF?
Well, that's the major issue. Because what we have seen, we all know that how precarious the economic situation is, and it is largely because of economic situation that the people have protested against. In fact, actually, apart from other reasons which had been mentioned earlier, I think probably one of the reasons for the people's anger and they voted against those parties was basically the economic situation. What we are witnessing today is inflation is record high. It has been more than 30% inflation for last 2 years almost, and it's continuing. What we have seen over the poverty, people living below poverty line has increased, and now 40% of the population living below the poverty line. And it's a very dangerous situation. And the gap between rich and poor has been increasing. So I think probably the biggest challenge for the government would be how to fix these issues. We are still in the IMF program, and it's a very stringent program. And I think probably without going along with it, we cannot even move forward, or we cannot deal with our economic problem. So the one thing is that the government needs to take tough decisions. Like, for example, privatization. There are some state enterprises which are losing much more, billions of rupees. It's draining and bleeding the Pakistan economy hugely. And there has always been actually that they will show. But I don't think that with this coalition government, they will go ahead on certain plan or particularly privatization. If they don't go, I don't think there's any actual chance of economy recovering or standing on its feet. The other thing is that is how to control inflation. And that is going to be a very serious challenge for them. And it's not easy because it is not. It can, like some of the political leaders have promised that they will bring down the inflation to 10% by the end of this year, but they never came out with any plan. How would they do it? It cannot be done through the government administrative orders by the government that from tomorrow on, the inflation rate should come down to 10%. I think probably, and the major problem with this government or the coalition government would be that whether they have a clear economic plan, they don't have. And we have seen already the same coalition had worked for 16 months after Imran Khan government was ousted. And in fact, actually, it has led to the worsening of economic situation. So what do you expect actually that same coalition coming back to power and without any economic plan or roadmap would be able to deal with this situation? So that is going to be the real challenge for them. The second challenge, I think, probably for the government is to that's the security situation, how to improve the security situation. The third thing, actually, that when we are talking about crisis, there's one more crisis, is basically the systemic failure, where we have seen that, the state institution have weakened over the years, and that's basically will be coming back to, I think probably that will create a lot more problem. In fact, actually, there will also be clash between these two political parties, which are expected to form the coalition, is that they have completely opposite view about how to deal with this situation. Like, for example, People's Party is opposed to privatization. They have opposed it, and so how would the government go about it? The second thing is that there have been some outlandish promises made by the leaders. I think it cannot be done, and then they have raised the expectation of people that the utility bill will come down hugely. But how would they do it? I mean, there's no plan. So I think probably the biggest challenge the future government would be facing, how to fix the economy. It's not just actually it cannot be deal with some short-term measure. It cannot be. We need a long planning to deal with the serious challenge, the economy.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Hussain. And you mentioned promises. I guess in Pakistan's case, we've witnessed some promises are meant to be broken, but the road is far from easy. We're looking at a bumpy ride ahead of us in terms of the economy and the sort of crises that you've highlighted, security-wise, systemic governance-wise. So there's a lot to be looking out for. But there's one question that I do want to touch upon before we open it up to the audience questions is something that's very much of interest to our work here are the foreign policy implications of what is happening in Pakistan right now and what government will take shape. Now, if I could just briefly come to you both, just very quick remarks on how do you anticipate the election outcomes influencing Pakistan's relationships with key players like the United States, China, the Gulf states, and also the neighboring countries. We talked about the security concerns on the border just earlier in our discussion. And there have been notable reactions from the United States, the UK, and Australia on the fairness of the elections, and as well as the EU. And we're seeing protests here in the United States and elsewhere on how election manipulation and rigging has taken place. So if I could just quickly come to you, Arifa, and then to Mr. Hussain for very brief remarks on those.
I don't envisage very many big changes on foreign policy. One, because I think the relationship with the US continues to be not a very comfortable one, I think, and it's been like that for some time. And perhaps still the election takes place in the US, and you have a new administration, which, then we can see perhaps if there is a little more interest in the on the part of the United States in Pakistan, because at the moment it seems as if the White House administration is really not interested. I think the only change that can be expected, or that people did expect, was that if the PMLN wins the election, it might have a more pro-India or an India-friendly policy. And that is something Mr. Nawaz Sharif has mentioned time and again since he has returned to the country, that we need to have better relations with our neighbors. And obviously that does mean, keeping in mind his past, that means peace with India. But I think here also the problem will be, again, India also is in the middle of an election year. and that the government in Pakistan will now be so weak in more ways than one. And secondly, also, I don't think whether it is PMLN or the military establishment, they've been able to square the circle. And the circle that has to be squared is, how are you going to reach out to India when, you still have taken this position that unless the August 5th decisions in Indian-held Kashmir or Indian-administered Kashmir are reversed. So I don't think the Indian government is going to make a change on that. Perhaps I'm wrong, but if they do not, then how are they going to square this circle that are they willing to sort of, is the government, in Pakistan willing to say, well, we will freeze our concerns about Kashmir where they are and reach out to India on, let's say, trade or a, better visa regime or whatever? I'm hard for me to say. Afghanistan will continue to be a problem. But because of TTP in particular, but I don't see a lot of change there with the political government. I think the security establishment will continue to dominate that area.
Thank you, Arifa. Mr. Hussain.
Well, I think foreign policy starts from home. So if you, whether this government will be able to bring much change, and what is needed there is not possible unless there is stability at home. The thing is that Pakistan is facing, we have already discussed about economic challenges. We have talked about, external, internal security situation. But I think Pakistan is also facing a huge problem. Foreign policy problem, because after the withdrawal of American forces from Afghanistan 2 years ago, we have seen a massive shift in regional geopolitics, and that has created quite a lot of challenge for Pakistan too. And in fact, actually, Pakistan at this point of time has uneasy relations with almost all the three major neighbors. And we have seen actually India, the relations with India, there has not been any improvement. We don't have a full diplomatic relations at this point with the country after what happened about 5th August 2019. And then we have, there was expectation that after the withdrawal of American forces in Afghanistan, things may actually may become very better for Pakistan on Western front. But in fact, actually, it has gotten worse. We have facing much more serious problem on our Western borders now, because soon after Taliban takeover, and it was expected, it was not unpredictable, that it has given a huge impetus to the militants in Pakistan. About a few years ago, we had this problem. We had this insurgency in former tribal areas bordering Afghanistan, but we managed to push that or retain the control of those areas. And in fact, actually, what is called TTP or Pakistani Taliban group, it was pushed back, and most of them then took a refuge in Afghanistan. And there was always been actually thinking that there was little difference between Afghan Taliban and Pakistani Taliban. And in fact, that has happened when Taliban came back to power in Afghanistan. And it has emboldened the Pakistani Taliban, most of whom had taken refuge across the border in Afghanistan. They are returning now, and they seem that they have the backing of the Afghan Taliban because they have been fighting together. So that is the challenge. Then obviously we have a relations with Iran. I know I'm not saying this very hostile relationship, but recently what we have seen that some kind of tit for tat attacks on each other's territory, and that shows actually is a very tenuous situation. Then actually we have we have good relations with China, and that will continue. As far as the relations with the United States, I don't think there's going to be any major breakthrough. The relations between the two countries have always been on this ups and down, massive ups and downs. And after we were the closest allies after 9/11 and after the withdrawal of American forces. I think that era has come to an end. So we have to look for some other basis to which, because to improve relation. In the past, we have seen that largely the relation between the two countries have been, has been seen by the United States from its security dimension. That needs to be changed. But all that actually, which I'm talking about, needs a strong, stable government which has some kind of vision to move forward. So I'll come back again, that it all depends on the domestic stability.
Right. So the domestic politics somewhat, or mostly, would be the influential factor determining how foreign policy implications would work out. There's a question in the chat box that also kind of connects with the question we were pondering over just right now, is that given the criticism from most countries on the fairness of the elections, what will be the legitimacy in terms of the recognition of the government? Do you think this criticism that's coming Pakistan's way, very much so through international media also, and from US Congress in particular, does that have any weight towards what the formulation might look like? So very quickly, if any one of you would want to take that question.
I think, sorry if I can take the question. I think it will bring the future government, coalition government, under more pressure. Because as what we were talking about, its legitimacy has been questioned. And I think probably with the criticism coming from the other countries and about the fairness, that will bring the coalition government under more pressure. And that's not going to be good. And obviously, it will give, or also give, more impetus to those people who believe that this government is not actually truly representative of the people.
And thank you very much. And Arifa, if I can come to you with the next question that I have in the chat box, is we heard of a few resignations, high-profile resignations, political resignations this morning from with Jahangir Tareen and Siraj ul-Haq and individually on their parties. So the question is, are these parties packing up, or there is a broader scenario in the play?
No, I think Siraj ul-Haq's resignation is separate, because obviously Jamaat-e-Islami does have its own, it's perhaps the closest that we have to a political party in Pakistan which democratically does elect the head of the party. So I think sort of, the term was also, he's had his run, and then the election result means that it's perhaps time for somebody else to step up. But obviously, Jahangir Tareen's resignation is completely different. As you know, after May 9th, with some pressure from the establishment, two political parties came forward from the existing Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf in a way. One was in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, led by Parvez Khattak, and the other one was Jahangir Tareen, formed the IPP. But the problem with the popular or a popular party in the sense which is being headed by a populist is that the connection of the voter or the worker of the party is with the individual right at the top. So these political parties were really never able to convince anyone that they had any standing in the electoral arena as such. And we saw that play out. I don't think anybody was surprised at all by the poor electoral performance of both these political parties. In fact, in IPP, the only two people have won the election that they were contesting, and both of them won it because they had a lot of support from the PMLN. Other than that, everybody else seems to have just, not succeeded. And that's true of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa also, where the gentleman who, formed that party was Parvez Khattak, who was the first chief minister for Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf when they first got power in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And there was this great myth that he was responsible for the success of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf's first government and all the work that they did in KP. And that because he was such a successful politician who could carry an alliance forward and get the bureaucracy to work, he would obviously not just make sure that he had other successful politicians with him, he would win from his area, but he lost in the entire district that, his family has been dominating the politics of that for such a long time. So I think these gentlemen were in some way encouraged or perhaps even pressured to form these political parties in the aftermath of May 9th. And now that the elections are over and they have seen what the response from the public is, one of them has definitely stepped aside. The other one we're still not sure of, because there came the announcement that he had resigned, Pervez Khattak, but then he denied it also. But it also shows that this is also, Pakistani history, that when you try to create factions from within a popular party, it doesn't work. It didn't work with Mr. Bhutto's party back in the 70s, and it didn't work with the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf now.
Thank you so much, Arifa. If I could come to Mr. Hussain for the next question, and very quickly, if you could respond to that. Will relations with China be determined by the party or coalition in power, or is the relationship on a trajectory independent of Pakistan's domestic political scenario? That is, is there a national consensus among all the actors, whether it's military, politicians, and civil society on China? It's a question that we received in the chat box. So, Mr. Hussain, quick take of yours on that.
I think there will not be any change on the policy on China. It's a kind of, there's a consensus among all the political parties that China is a strategic ally, main strategic ally of Pakistan. And now over the years, we have also seen, we had this strategic alliance with China for a very long time. It started way back in 1960s. But in the recent years, or last 2 decades, it has also taken another dimension, which is economic. And I think probably that's not going, it will not depend actually whichever government is in power in Pakistan. It will remain the same.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I have another question in our Q&A box here, which is from an American-born Pakistani who points out that when you look at the political parties at play here in the United States, you see tangible policy differences. But when it comes to Pakistan, and I'm assuming this is a young participant, a young audience member with us today, they always come back with the same response, that within the political parties in Pakistan, it's who is less corrupt. What sets them apart is who is less corrupt. Are they right, or is it possible to see the differences in policy platforms, and do they matter? Arifa, if you could respond to that question for us.
A long debate. I would just say that, we are still sort of at a very different point of evolution. And in an environment where political parties are constantly battling political instability and trying to survive, you're either in power and, facing one challenge after another, or you're out of power and basically just trying to survive as a political party. So in this Lord of the Flies situation, there really isn't much space for political parties to focus on governance, to focus on policy. We of course do have sort of, you can say one is a center of the left, one is center of the right, or a right-wing party, but that's about it. These are just broad strokes. The economic policy is completely dependent on the IMF. But for me personally, I genuinely feel that till we allow the political parties space to work on governance and politics without this constant civil military tug of war, we will never get beyond this corruption or, the Americans conspire to throw the government out kind of, stuff.
I'm very cognizant of the time here and the interest of time. I'm just going to take one last question here, which is rather poetic, and 2 questions asking more or less the same thing. I'm going to merge them together. Is Pakistan entering dusk before going into dark, or is it dark before dusk? Or are we looking at a step forward, or more of the same, or a step backwards? So very quickly, both of you could just shed light on that for us.
I think we have seen this for many, many years. So, but I always believe that, yes, we are passing through probably the worst crisis, a political crisis in years. But I think probably it also gives an opportunity, because when you hit the rock bottom, then there's no other way but to get up and move forward. And I think probably that I still, and despite all those things which we have discussed just now, all the problems, I still believe that probably from this crisis, the country could come out much better. I think we have to go through this to get up and do something for ourselves.
Arifa, what are your thoughts on that?
Very quickly, I think that there will be more instability, so there might be a little more damage and destruction before we get to the point where we, get off the floor, dust ourselves off. But I'd just like to add that I think the past 2 years have been particularly difficult and depressing, but February 8th changed something for a lot of us. It was just amazing the way people came out and voted.
That's right.
I think
Probably, if I may add, that has given hope because people have spoken. Despite all those problems, they came out and voted for whatever. I'm not saying that not supporting Imran Khan or whatever, but they did actually vote for whoever they wanted. And basically, it's also vote against the establishment and against the established politics. And I think that gives us such hope that the women, the way youth and women came out and voted. So that gives me huge actually hope that things will improve.
And that's great to end this on a hopeful note, and they say, a bone that is broken heals stronger. So I hope that's the same case for Pakistan. It heals better, heals stronger. But thank you very much for joining me today, both Arifa and Mr. Hussain, and thank you so much for your candid insights and for all the valuable perspectives that you've shared with us and everyone who joined us and made this conversation all the more engaging. Please do stay in touch with the Asia Society Policy Institute. Particularly, I would encourage you to visit our election hub on our website called the Ballot Box, where we'll be featuring a lot of election-related analysis, not only within elections that are happening in Asia, but beyond and of interest to Asia. So thank you once again, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. Thank you.